So let me introduce myself. I'm Jon Cordeiro. I'm the founder and national director of New Name Ministries in Fort Worth, Texas. We provide sex offender-only residential reentry. And we've been in Fort Worth now. We're in our 9th year. We have 2 facilities, 20 beds. 100% of our graduates have not reoffended sexually. And we're very grateful for that and looking forward to helping others to duplicate what we do. And even though that's been my primary focus for the last 8.5 plus years in Texas, prior to that I was involved in reentry, and I am a former sex offender, and I have been through the process of incarceration and homelessness and losing 2 professional licenses, and pretty much there isn't anything that I haven't dealt with that I can't identify with to some degree or another. And after working with over 100 men coming in and through our program, I have to say I've pretty much seen everything. So when it comes to reentry, I have a pretty good sense of what the challenges are for those of us who have to register. Some of this may seem obvious to you, but what happens when you get into a stressful situation is you can't think, and the obvious goes right by you. And it's good that you prepare before, because you only will respond according to how well prepared you are in any given situation. So it's good that you're taking the time, you're investing in this now. You're able to take and you'll be able to get this PowerPoint off of the RSOL website or off of my personal website and pass this on to your loved ones and to others that you work with in the communities that you come from. So, overcoming reentry barriers. I'm a simple guy. My name is Jon. It's Jon. It's not Jonathan. It's not John. I didn't need that extra H anyways. But I do a lot of wordsmithing. Some of you may know that I have a book that I was privileged to be involved with called Unprecedented: How Sex Offender Laws Have Impacted Our Nation. And when you look at words, they're very powerful, and even the words that we speak to ourselves, and that's part of what we'll talk about a little bit today, because that makes a big difference, because what we tell ourselves, people can usually tell when they're looking at us, because what we're thinking kind of is how we process our body language, and people can look at your face or look in your eyes, or, and if you're walking around and you're believing that label of being a monster or being unworthy or unacceptable, then it just impacts your whole persona. So words are very powerful. In the Bible it says that they have the power of life and death. And so I choose to speak life. But I also want to know my opponent. And so words are really important. And so when I chose the title of this, I did it deliberately, because overcoming is something that is beyond the battle. It's the war. It's winning the war. And we have a war that we're in, and we're amidst a number of different battles, each of us, personally and otherwise. And so, not to belabor this, but orbs is just fun for me. I like to take and use acronyms and such, but this picture struck me as being what happens in the process of reentry. In this picture, I look and I see somebody who's built some pretty hefty muscles, and they're exuding energy in doing that. And if you look, they've already overcome mountains in their past. They have built those muscles because they have experience, they have things that are behind them. And what ends up happening is it's rugged terrain, and they're having to basically pull themselves up, but we're the rope. We're the ones that are there to help them up so that they succeed. We can shout. I think, my wife got into medicine 37 years ago, and part of what she did was she was the emergency planner for the city of Houston and she worked for the fire department. And one of the things that she had to do was jump out of high buildings, like 12 stories high. And she was scared spitless. And so she decided that what she was going to do was that she was going to go, adventurous spirit that she is, my little Irish girl, she decided she was going to go do some rock climbing. And it was a 700-foot cliff. And she got, I don't know, 40 feet from the top, and she froze. 660 feet up the cliff and froze. And the guy's going, "What are you doing?" See, he's the rope. He's using words, encouragement. "You're almost there. Come on, you can do this. You got to see the view. You got to do this. There is no other choice." And she did. And we got the picture to prove it. She's standing on that cliff, that little pinnacle, you know, with a smile from ear to ear. She made it. And she's done a lot of other things that she's, I would say, have been overcoming to that same effect in her life, particularly being married to me. So, you know, this process that takes place is one that they're going to feel very alone in, as I'm sure some of you feel pretty alone in your journey as well. And so try and use that as a way of identifying, but also realizing that as much as you are indirectly impacted as loved ones, that they carry your burden of shame too. So that carries out. And so they need that encouragement. They need to know that they're forgiven, that they're loved, that you still honor them for all the good that's in them, and that we have something that we can deal with here, and let's just do it. So I like playing with words, and so when I say overcoming, it's like, okay, so it's conquering a problem. It's a transitive verb that says to struggle successfully, keyword, against a difficulty or a disadvantage. And I can't think of a more disadvantaged group of people than those who've been labeled a sex offender. So I thought that really tied in pretty well. And then when you're talking about reentry, you're talking about entering again. A gal came up prior to and said, "Yeah, I'm so torn. I want to go to this one. I want to go to the other one. And, you know, what would you be able to, you know, share with me?" And I said, "You know, this is all available for you." But she says, "Well, this friend never even went to prison, and, you know, he's on an adjudicated sentence, yada, yada. But see, it's entering again. And the truth is when you come through the system, it doesn't matter whether you're on an adjudicated sentence, but once you've been put in that place of being labeled, you are re-entering the community as someone perceived different than when you entered into this process. So it's re-entry at a different level. Repossession of land. I love this one because what ends up happening, and I experienced this, you know, I said before I lost 2 professional licensors, I lost properties, I lost 2 businesses, I lost my family, I went through bankruptcy. Like I said, anything that could happen, I've been through it. And so from that place, it was, for me, such a privilege to, after 7 years of walking through incarceration and successful treatment and reentering the community, and then going through retroactive registration, for me to reclaim land and then to become a homeowner and then to be able to get a car loan and then be able to get, you know, just to have a life come back. So reclaiming our life, reclaiming that territory that you were called to have is important. And so I really encourage you to celebrate the little victories along the way. Make a big deal of a little thing because it's not that little, okay? Taking of lead in cards games. Now, there's a reason I left that in there. Because if you've ever been in prison, they play a lot of card games. And so I'm always looking for illustrations that, you know, for identification's sake. And so it talks about here in some card games such as bridge, the regaining of control by taking a trick or a card played to take the trick. What is that about? That's called strategy. What are you doing when you're playing cards, right? You're thinking about, what's the other guy thinking? What's the other guy doing? What has he laid down? What's the next step? How do I block him? How do I get on him? And you have to be on the offensive. We heard that word this morning. And I have to tell you that most of us, when we get into the process, we're on the defensive because we're hurting, we're vulnerable, and we're fearful. Stop that. I have to tell myself to stop that all the time, you know, because I still have other people throwing that shame on me. But that's okay. Teflon. Shh, Teflon. Let it go. So we want to regain control, healthy controls, not controlling control. And we want to get over these barriers. And a barrier is nothing more than a structure that blocks access. Wow, that sounds a lot like the registry, or being on parole, or probation as it were, because they throw up all kinds of barriers. And it varies. I mean, depending on what state you're in, and whether it's probation or parole, whether it's federal, whether it's state, whether it's, I mean, it just goes on and on. It is a, you know, it's a wild card almost. So in some of these things I'll be talking about will be general, but I want to encourage you, if you have specifics, feel free to offer that reflection, and let's see if we can put something with it that makes it, you know, a victory for us. Something that obstructs, limit, or standard. That's the one thing I see that happens often, is that mindset again, that we are the ones that walk in that level of limitation. There's a gentleman who said, don't let what you can't do get in the way of what you can do. And that's been really important to me. It's the reason that I'm here today. Because if I chose to believe that, you know, I can't change, or I can't do things for others, or that, you know, people won't support what we do, then none of us would be here, because we wouldn't be having a conference. Okay, so you're in a race. Or your kids are, or your loved ones, or, you know, whoever it is that you identified today as being on your heart and why you're here. But like it or not, you are in this race, and the time to prepare for the race is before, not after the gates open. You don't show up and go, okay, what do I do? What kind of sneakers do I buy? You know, do I wear this kind of suit, or what do I do? Which direction do I run? And so you have to get prepared. And I'm so glad to hear that people are here that are looking well in advance. You know, even 1,149, yeah, all those days ahead. By the way, you never know what can happen, because I've had guys get early release. You know, God is able to do greater things than we even hope or imagine. Okay, yeah, right? It's worst case scenario. I love that. Okay, so get set. Get a vision. Get a vision that you can run with. If you can't see what it is you want, you won't recognize it when you get to it. You'll walk right by it. And you won't have any passion for it, because you'll be willing to take whatever comes. And so when guys come out to us, what we say is, look, it's this simple. You need to eat. You need to pay your bills. So you get a job. A job might be flipping burgers. It may be washing cars. It may be doing some landscaping. That's not the end of the world. That fact might be exactly what you need to get humble enough to hear what you need to hear. So it gets you where you need to go. But who do you see yourself as? What does your future look like? What do you want your future to look like? Because if you don't have a vision, you won't have the unction to function. You'll just roll over, and every day I go to work, and nothing's going to change, and poor me's. Chance Oberstein, here's a guy that was on the registry, lost his license to practice law, and he went back and got his license back? Don't tell me it can't be done. We're people that were created in the image of God. I'm sorry, I'm a pastor, so you're going to get that piece from me. And God's great. He's greater than anything we can hope or imagine, and we can do a lot more than we think we can. But it all starts with a thought. So keep your eye on the goal that's ahead of you. So have some goals. And it might be that when your loved one gets out, you say to them, give me the goals for this week. Give me the goals for this month. Give me the goals for the first 6 months of your life out. And then we're going to talk about how we get there. What is that going to look like? And do I have permission to keep you accountable? Because if I don't have permission to keep you accountable, then all bets are off. But if you have permission, see, that's a two-edged sword. Because real accountability means that you really care enough to help them get there. It means you can say no. It means you can say get out of bed. It means you can say stop watching TV. You need to be taking care of your commitments. You know, consequences for choices. But there has to be that goal, that vision. If they don't have the vision, then the consequences are nothing more than punishment. They don't see it as being part of the process. Does that make sense? And it's usually us that have the hard time with that. These guys are coming out of prison. They've been told what to do for the last few years. So really, if you want to help them, take advantage of that mindset that they're in and help them with that structure and give them direction because they're really looking for it. It won't be as offensive to them as you think. All right, so once you get going, don't look back. And by the way, I hated running when I was, in school. I had to play sports. That was mandatory. And running was not it for me. But I did learn some of the things that they said. You don't look back, because if you look back, it slows you down. And you got to learn how to relax. You got to be comfortable. That's why that vision is so important, because that vision is what you anchor into as part of the hope of your future. And you can start breathing and relaxing and projecting on that. Think about it. Most of us will walk through life, and whatever we're projecting, that's pretty much what happens. So it's really important that you get those of us who are going through this process to breathe and relax, pace themselves, because that's one thing I see with the guys coming out. There's pretty much two ends of the spectrum. They're either in too much of a hurry, or they're so scared of rejection that they find reasons not to pick up the phone, to not get on the bus, not to go out and get in front of people. They'll find any other reason. And that's why when I said make some goals, it's because unless you have something, you have nothing. So that pacing of self is important. We make it mandatory that the guys go out and they get at least 5 applications in a week and at least 3 interviews. So, from that place, then you have something that's measurable, achievable, and effective in helping them in that process of pacing themselves, learning how to breathe through these interviews. And then be thankful. Actually, I forgot. Celebrate daily. I said that before about celebrating the victories. If they make that phone call and it was a good phone call and they feel good about it, ask them why they feel good about it. Ask them, or if they don't feel good about it, well, what could you have done differently? Well, they were this. Okay, but what could you have done differently? Well, they said they were hiring. What could you have done differently? Could you have asked them if they knew someone who was hiring? Could you ask them if you could come in for an interview regardless of whether they're hiring? It's important. They need that process. It's that attitude. And celebrate anytime that they do have a small victory, particularly in that realm. If they're feeling fearful, you want to really dote on that and encourage them to be thankful. One of the things that I see that happens with guys that come out to our ministry is they get home and they're like, oh my God, I didn't think it was going to be this nice. And they look in the fridge and there's food. And we got freezers full of food. And then they see that there's clothes, and then they see that there's, clean rooms and clean bathrooms, and that, there's guys there that are willing to help them. And they're thankful. The trick is keeping them that way. So encourage that thankfulness, Just simple things. Okay, so it says, in developing a plan, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. And that's what I was talking about earlier. When I'm talking about a vision and goals, that is what preparing is. That's the process, is looking at what do I really want to do? Now listen to this. I remember when I went through treatment that my treatment providers said, John, you could have been an attorney. Yeah, I probably could have. And there were some other things they said, or you could have done something like this or that. And actually, one of them was, you could be an author. You could be a writer. And guess what? Now I have a book. Now I speak in front of the legislators in Texas. I address down their legislation. I address their legal issues. Just because I can't go hang a license on a wall someplace doesn't mean I can't go practice law, because that's all they're doing. So, I want to encourage this. Gloria Steinem says, without leaps of imagination or dreaming, we lose the excitement of possibilities. Dreaming, after all, is a form of planning. And, speaking as a leader of a ministry that just about burned my wife and I out, that was where we got redirected, was we had stopped dreaming. We really got to the point where we didn't know what that looked like. And I've seen, again, this seems to be an extreme. You see guys in prison who actually feel hopeless and they don't have any hope or dream. And then you have guys that they seem to be the dreamers. Oh my gosh, their world's awash with all kinds of dreams. But they're so dreamy that they're no earthly good. So you have to help them, bring that dream down to something that's achievable and something that can be measurable and something that can be achievable. And it's something that will make the difference for them. And it may not be the ultimate goal, but if it's part of the process, that's good too. But encourage that ability for them to go, hey, even while they're incarcerated. So, what's your son's name, Ryan? Nick, I'm sorry. So Nick, what do you think? What do you want to do when you get out of here? Oh, Mom, I think I want to go to school and become a mechanic. Well, really? What kind of mechanic? Well, let's start looking at schools. What does that look like? What's it going to cost? How are we going to get there? And then you start looking at, are there any barriers there? You can start talking to him. Make it his problem, though. Make it his idea. Because if it's yours, forget it. Okay, so being proactive. We tell these guys that their job until they get a job is to find a job. And they have to be proactive about that. It's not going to just be given to them. They have to work at it. And I want you to understand something. When folks are incarcerated, even though they may have jobs, the work ethic within the prisons is marginal, typically. There's not a lot of expectation. You may have a crew of guys, 12 guys, that go out there to work on that AC unit. It only takes one. Most of them are drinking coffee or getting the captain the coffee or whatever it is. And so that they just are really not involved. They don't have the work ethic. They haven't really had the opportunity to tough it out and to be responsible in the measure that you think. They'll tell you that they're doing all these things. But really what a lot of times I see that's happened is that they've been exposed to it but not really experienced it. And so they're not typically where they think they are. And what happens with folks when they're incarcerated is they get institutionalized and they get used to having others tell them what to do. So from a reentry process, I want you to understand something. Reentry shouldn't be when he gets out of the gates. Reentry should start now. It should be something he's thinking about, planning for, and putting effort into now. And so you have to understand, when they're inside, they don't get to do anything. They don't turn lights on and off. They don't get to decide when they're going to eat, what they're going to eat. I mean, so think about getting a job. How do you go from not even, knowing how much or what a cell phone does? I mean, that changes every day for all of us. So these guys, They need to learn how to ask questions, to take initiative. They need to turn obstacles into opportunities. They need to stop blaming others. I want to encourage y'all just to redirect. And I always ask the guys, this is what I say, look, what about this is about you, and what about this is about the other person? Because you can't do nothing about the other person, but you can do something about you. If you take care of you, the rest of these things will take care of themselves. And so, start getting in that process of holding them responsible by equipping them. I'm not condemning them when I say that. I'm trying to encourage them to get their head in the right place. So remember, the good is the enemy of the best. That's the other thing, is that some guys feel as though, well, it's good enough. I hate that. I really do. Because my job is to call the best out of people. And sometimes they're too complacent, they're too apathetic, or they're willing to accept less than what they truly are capable of because they're fearful or they believed a lie about themselves. And so it's really important to, take and encourage them by just saying, so do you think that's the best thing for you? Or do you think that was the best you could do? Or do you think that's the best job for you? I've told guys who have come back to me and said, I got a job, blah, blah, blah. Really? Is that really the best for you? Because it may not be. There may be triggers in there. Even if it's not, even if it meets all the requirements of parole, it may be something that's not appropriate for that person. And so you have to be careful. And then you got to make sure that they surround themselves with positives. People, books, network of it might be the church community, it might be family, it might be whoever, but you want to encourage them to not gravitate back to what they've always done or who they've always known, but to surround themselves with people that can identify with them and can hear them and can help be their accountability partners. Okay. This is an area that I see as being difficult for a lot of guys because, again, as I said, a lot of these men that I deal with have gone in, they're very young, they have very little experience, they're not very well equipped administratively, and so they don't really know how to organize their life, particularly when you have to realize they're just doing time. And they just, they're used to reading all the time, or they're used to playing cards, or going down to the rec room and just killing time. And so what I've learned is that with order comes increase. One of the things that we do with our guys is we have an order and increase form. The goal is to have their life increase in good things, rewards. But we don't want to take the control. We just want to see if they have control. So we ask them to keep an accounting of their time and their money, the two things that you spend that you don't typically get back. And what that helps with is part of their goal when they come into our ministry is at the end of the year, they'll have $3,500 saved so that when they leave, that they have enough money to do it without stress. They're stabilizing their own lives. So they need to make that plan. They need to work that plan. But if you do it every week and you show how much time are you spending in all these things that are a priority, and where have you spent your money, which shows you where your priorities are, then you can do an assessment every week. So it's kind of a budget, but it's a budget of time and a budget of finance. And that really helps to bring perspective and to bring maturity. Because then you can, there's the evidence right there. And, I've seen guys go, for instance, the other day I had a guy that, he said, I'm down at the parole, and so I just decided to walk back. And I said, do you have a bus ticket? Yeah. I said, and you walked back why? He says, I just figured it'd be the same amount of time either way. Really? Well, here's part of the deal. When you're on parole, part of your life is ordered for you. They don't want you necessarily walking by the same things that they'll let you take a bus to go by. They'll let you take the bus to go by a daycare, a park, a church, and guess what he walked by on the way home? And a school. Oh, Terry, you're so intuitive. Yeah, and so, it's that ordering of thinking things through because they don't. And so, like I said, part of what I'm saying here, you might be going, yeah, that's so obvious. Yeah, that's so obvious. Not to them. So, log your activities. That's why I talked about those order and increase sheets. Keep track of all your contacts. This is so important. This is the part that is, I will be also posting out on my site a secondary list that talks about statistically where you'll find jobs and how. And I have to tell you, it still comes back to who you know and not what you know. And if you don't know somebody, go introduce yourself. Put yourself in that place. Go to the business networks that are going on in your community, the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club. As long as those things are within the parameters of what parole or probation will allow you to do, they're not in a child safety zone or what have you, make those contacts. Go, because you're a person. People won't purchase your pass, but they'll invest in you. And so if you get you out there, you don't know who you're talking to. You may be actually talking to somebody whose son is incarcerated at the very time that you're saying, do you know anything? I've got a pass, but I've got this resume, and I sure would like to have an opportunity to sit down with somebody. And you'd be surprised what can happen. Just for having the courage to go out and do it, people give you the time. It's crazy, but it's true. 86% of all jobs come from one-to-one contact. So keep track of those contacts, names, dates, notate discussions, ideas, and results. Here's the other part of it. Okay, so you get out there and you go to the Rotary meeting, or he goes, or what have you, and you find out the people you talk to that, well, there were a couple of jobs there, but not anything I'm qualified for. But oh my gosh, wait a second. I've got guys back in group that are unemployed, and they're looking for a job like that, and now I can be a resource. That's important, because what you sow, you're going to reap. And so if you have that opportunity to help others, that also takes in, wait a second, I'm an okay person. I am a person. I can be a benefit to the community. So network is, it comes back to who you know is sometimes more valuable than what you know, but reach out to the old contacts and new. Now, I want to tell you something about that. You need to be careful about who your loved ones reach out to, because some of those people were contributors to some of their thinking errors. And so you want to kind of filter that, help them filter that before they make that, as they're making that list of who they're going to contact. And you can encourage them now, while they're incarcerated, Yeah, to make that list of contacts and go, who fits and who doesn't, And so really, really important. And then, the good news about new contacts is that you have a choice on that, If you put your discerner on, put the filters up, choose where you go and who you're with, and then focus on the areas of interest and abilities. This is going to surprise you. Do you know what the second most efficient way for finding a job is, other than the who you know? It's knowing what you want to do and getting a phone book and calling the people who do what you want to do. Call me silly, but I'm going to tell you, after almost 9 years, it has been one of the primary places where my guys find jobs. And part of that comes from the vision element. I say, well, what do you really want to do? Okay. So okay. Then I say, well, what can you do? All right. Well, start with what you want to do. Let's go out there first. Let's go fishing for the big one. And if we just, if we have to settle for a small job while we're looking for the big job, that's okay too. But start, get some vision. But a phone book, believe it or not, well, of course, now these days, there's not a lot of phone books out there, but they do have them. And you can have someone, they could have a loved one go online for them and pull it down out of the yellow pages online. But you'd be surprised. Persistence overcomes resistance. And so that's part of that planning element. Being willing to put yourself out there on a daily basis, every week having a goal of how many applications, how many personal contacts you'll make, how many meetings you'll go to. A lot of folks may be already going to 12-step programs. Maybe they don't. You don't have to be a 12-stepper to go to a 12-step program. You can, and you can typically get your permission from a parole or probation officer to go to those because they're already letting their other clients go. But that's also another place that's a resource. Usually there's 12-step clubs that are in your city that would be homes, particularly on the weekend. Saturdays they'll have kind of like marathon meetings, and you can go and sit and visit with folks, and you'd be surprised. Again, that's networking, it's one-on-one, and a lot of times, at the very least, those guys will help find some pickup work, just the little stuff so they can pay for their parole fees or their cell phone or whatever that's going to be. And the greatest resistance that I see these guys meet is typically within themselves. I am never surprised anymore when I have one of my clients come in who says to me, I'll be employed in 2 weeks. And they're usually employed within 2 days because their whole attitude is that I'm going to be employed. I'm employable, and I'm going to tell the employer that, and I'm going to let them know that they want me. And they may not get the money they want right off the bat, but I'll tell you what, they'll be the first one to say, I told them I'd take the job, but I'm not going to work for that kind of money after 2 weeks. I mean, they're just that, that specific. I have one of my guys that, God bless him, he came out, and he had been in the oil business for years. Had been up in Alaska for 12 years. He had worked the big rigs, run crews, family was involved. When he came out, he ended up turning wrenches at Meineke Muffler, and they were calling him Chester the Molester, and they were making his life miserable. And see, that was the A job. That was a job. And he called me up one day and said, Pastor John, please, can I quit? I said, do you have another job? No, but I can't take this anymore. I said, do you have a choice? Well, if I quit, then what happens? I said, you don't have a job, you don't pay your bills? I said, how's that going to work? He goes, well, I really hate this. I said, I know you do, but it's going to be okay. It's just a job. And he ended up sticking that out for like 7 months. And it changed him. It created in him a level of grace and insight and ability to be tough-skinned enough that now that he's making over $100,000 a year back in the oil fields, when he goes through the same abuse from others that find out, it's okay. It's all right. He paid off $176,000 worth of child support in 2.5 years. Paid it off. Didn't see how that was going to happen when he was turning wrenches at Meineke, let me tell you. So, the process sometimes may not make sense, but you have to give opportunity for change. It doesn't always come in the way you think. Okay, so any progress toward the goal is still measurable and meaningful to results. Remember what I talked about celebrating? Celebrate the fact that, hey, man, you still have a job. Brag them, hey, proud of you. Proud of you for sticking with that. Just love on them. Just give them enough so that they know this is real life, but we see you, and we appreciate you. Evaluate. Throughout the whole process, you need to evaluate and look at, is your plan working? How's that working for you? It's a great question. We ask it somewhat rhetorically often, but it really is important that you take a look at, Are you really using your time wisely? Because they have not been governed by time for long periods of time. They say for every year that someone has been incarcerated, it is 2 years recovery time to normalize. I still don't like going inside. I go in often, and when those big steel doors clang, it's still like, at least I know they let me out. Consider an accountability partner for outside insights and reality checks. That might be somebody outside the family. That might be, if it's an AA mentor or someone who's discipling through the church, or family member, or a healthy friend. But encourage them to get into some form of an accountability partner, and tweak it as needed. Don't assume that just because you're going through the motions, because that's the one thing that I see that happens with the guys, is that when they're incarcerated, they're just expected to go through the same motions every day. As long as they're doing this, everything's good. So they think that as long as I'm doing this, I'm going to get a job. Not true. You need to tweak it. You need to reevaluate. How's that working for you? Can you do anything different? Have you been keeping all those contacts? Have you called back the contacts? How many times have you called them back? So housing. Any questions before we get off the job portion of the equation? Is there any piece out of that would be?
Getting a job is a job.
Absolutely.
My little brother's been in and out several times, and right now our family's just crossing our fingers that he keeps this construction job he's got, and kind of dips a little bit, but the more he just keeps focused on that, the better things are. And so, because the statistics, when you don't have a job, going back to that, you don't have a routine, you get out of that routine, idle hands devil's work, all that kind of stuff. And let me tell you, man, personal experience watching my little bro, that's exactly true.
Yeah, so having some structure is really, that's one of the reasons that don't mean to take anything, make any kind of a statement toward families' abilities to love on and encourage their loved ones, but being a residential reentry program where we have those things in place, that structure and that accountability and expectations, and we use stewardship as our way of exposing and developing character, and that's not to be confused with doing chores. That's we have a housing steward, we have a transportation steward, a facility steward, a hospitality steward. We have, essentially a list of what does that look like. It gives them identity. It gives them something they can put on and walk in, and But it also requires that they be responsible, that they take initiative, because when you're in prison, you don't take initiative for anything other than protecting yourself. And that becomes unhealthy. Go ahead, Terry.
I know with Ryan, his, I think, biggest concern is he was hired as a genius with Apple when he was 20. I mean, he's had no problems getting jobs from then on. I mean, he just doesn't. Now he says, I know what's happened. I'm going to check the box that I've had a felony, and it's going to go in the circular file. I have no hope. I'm done. How do you get over that? How does that just finally get over that? And you're like, okay, now I'm checking the box on a felony, now I'm checking the box on a registered sex offender. Because nobody's going to want me. Nobody's going to hire me. I can't even use a computer. I'm a former Apple genius. Can't even use a computer.
If that's his belief, it's probably going to be just that. Yeah. And so that's why it's important that he realize that though there are limitations potentially before him, that doesn't preclude him using the experiences he had and that knowledge to do jobs that he may be overqualified for, but it's a job until he can get the job. And so it comes back to, how are you filtering this? If he's believing the lie that no one will ever hire me, blah, 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 I'm going to tell you right now, I have all of my guys are working. All of my guys are working. And so he may have some limitations, but here's the other thing I've also seen, Terry, is I have guys that come out and the PO will typically say no to everything right up front. And they want to see, who is this guy? I want to see him, I want to see some boots on the ground. I want to see him go through a few challenges before I'm going to give him anything. And then when they have earned the respect of their PO, then and only then will they be given the privilege of being released to things that will make their life better. I tell our guys, look, your job is to make your PO's job easy. One of the things we do that, you know, if you're going to work with your son directly when he comes out, you know, our guys they know they got to do the travel routes. They know they have to do this, they have to do that. And it's all on the computer, and the guys are happy to help the new guy coming out, so it reduces that stress level way down. Some of those things you're just going to have to press in and press through. And all I can tell you is that if he will have the right attitude, and even if his PO is a giant jerk, it is what can your son do to make that PO's life easier? That's really important. And from there, what can happen is that the PO will go, well, if you're using the computer at work, it's okay as long as the company has filters. I'm going to tell you right, any company that is en masse has filters. And so it all is progressive. So that's why I said you have some guys that are like, you know, they're way out there. They think they're going to, or they are coming out and they're thinking they'll never. Pretty much whatever you think is what you're going to get. That's why that attitude adjustment needs to take place. And that's why I say start with the reentry process while you're inside. Now, that being said, what could your son do at this point? He could write some of those people he's been employed by over the years. He could share his story with those personal contacts. He could tell them his concerns about being employable when he gets out. He could ask them for leads. He could ask them if they would hire him at any level, just so that he could have a job. Would they be willing to help him? Because the truth of the matter is, and he can say, and I would highly recommend, be honest, be accountable, and just say, you know, you don't have to write back. You know, you can just, you know, spit on this and send it back to me. You know, but what I'm saying is that I can't change that. If I could, I would, and I need help. Can you help me? And then that person is faced with either saying no or saying yes. And then that's about them.
And it's a small world too. You never know that people that are in Ryan's position that are.
You never know.
You know, I find this even small examples of that with his mandatory counseling. And then his attorney wanted him to go to the 12-step at Kaiser, so he went there. Well, while he went to the counselor at Kaiser, guess what? He was part of another program outside, the sex addiction. He wanted to go to sex addiction. He wanted to go to all these clinics. And he goes to Kaiser, it's like, I know you from somewhere. I can't counsel you. I mean,
sure,
so
the small world syndrome.
It's a small world. So,
yeah.
You know, you've got people out there that are like, okay, he's not a bad guy. He just...
Right. You know, and then the adjunct to what we're saying is okay, so your son has all this experience and gifting, and he may feel like his life is, you know, tossed on that. All right. So what else is he interested in doing?
And he does. He has a lot of interest in a lot of other things that he's really quite talented at. Unfortunately, you know, I wish I had half his talent or half his brains. You know, that would be good.
You know, it's sort of like this. If you ask him this question, if you could do anything you wanted to do, what would it be? My father-in-law always says, you know, if it's 2/3 fun, you never work another day in your life. And so if you could find something that you really like doing, what would it be? Because he may be really good at what he used to do, and that may have been really rewarding in the sense that he got a good paycheck and job security, what have you, but it may not really be what he wanted to do.
That's true, because it was, you know, that's a paycheck, yeah.
You know? And so, you know, I used to make my living with a pen. And, you know, writing contracts and talking to people and helping them. And I made great money. And then I ended up having, you know how I supported myself when I first got out? I had 5 paper routes. I got up at 3:30 in the morning, and I went out and did 5 paper routes. That's how I got started. And then I started taking on jobs as a handyman because I ran into somebody who said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Blah, blah. Here's where I've been, what's been going on in my life." And, you know, I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. I mean, I was a lot skinnier then. But people wanted to help when they heard what I was doing and they knew what capacity I used to be in. They said, "Well, could you do some handyman work?" And I ended up becoming a whole house contractor. And then I ended up, when I moved to Texas, being a commercial contractor, licensed. So, you know, you never know where these journeys will take you. Frank?
Just as an example, I went through that same thinking process,
Okay,
thinking no one's going to hire me. And
Okay.
I think it's just a part of what we will normally go through,
yeah,
because that rejection factor is there. But I finally got up the courage to write a company that I used to work for years ago, back 30 years ago. But one of the men is a man I hired, and now he's actually up higher in the company.
okay,
So I went ahead and we made the contact, I wrote the letter, and of course, I don't want the rejection, but that one, it was rejected. He didn't want to have anything to do with me. So, but because I made the effort in my head, I went, you know what? It may not have turned out the way I wanted it, but I actually did it.
yeah.
The first step was I did it. I mean, I went through the
Big step.
process. And I've learned to reward myself whenever I do things. That's the process I go through. So then there was another company that I worked for about 15 years ago, and I did the same thing. And he let me write the actual letter, the reference letter. He said, "Yeah," he said, "just write it up. Send it to me." And so I sent it to him, and then he tweaked it a little bit, and he sent back this letter that I had written, saying all the things that I had done for his company.
Wow.
So again, it works, but you have to take the effort to do it.
Yeah, that's so true. And you did something that I've been speaking to, and that you celebrated. You found victory even in the midst of the rejection. You know, you found the courage to step out. In fact, I remember you and I having that conversation, and I said, "Why don't you contact them? What's the worst they're going to do? They're going to say no." You know, in my economy, no is as good as yes. It still gives me an answer.
Well, inventors celebrate with not their victories, but what they didn't find out, because that's finally, they're not getting to the final goal without the failures. So I know scientists look at it.
And one thing I would say, I just want to reemphasize that I think it's important to disclose with an employer. And, well, within reason, you know, get face to face, get relational, and don't lie on the application. I usually recommend that if it asks if you've had a felony background, I don't even check the box. I say just write in, "We'll discuss." That gives opportunity, because you haven't said yes, you haven't said no, you said, "I will talk to you about that." And I can't even begin to tell you how many times that's opened the door for that didn't know what I didn't know, and you find out the guy, he'll hire you because it's his store and he can hire whoever. Now here's the caveat to that, though. So what I've seen happen a couple times in this past year was guys who had gone in, followed that direction, gotten hired in the local store, but then they were encouraged to apply for a promotion. Well, the promotional development goes through corporate. When corporate pulled the history, they were like, "Hell no. What's he doing in that store?" And they lost their job. And so understand limitations again of that was a great A job, and you have to be discerning in this and have strategy and know. Remember I talked about knowing your enemy? the enemy is you know, giving too much when you should have reserved. Okay, so I'm going to move on to this next portion, talk about housing for a second. And, you know, you'd mentioned halfway houses, and of course, there are some people still call them aftercares or reentry homes or recovery homes. There's all kinds of different names. But temporary arrangements can make a permanent difference. And let me tell you, that cuts both ways. Because in Texas, halfway houses are known for being drug infested and having huge corruption with the guards. There's tons of drugs. There's pornography. There's sex, illicit sex that's brought in. And it's known for this. Yeah, right? And so on one hand, those, you know, you have to look at if an opportunity is being offered to your loved one to go to a halfway house, first of all, I don't believe in doing anything halfway. So, you know, I think it's really important that you say, well, where is that? Because honestly, it might be better for them just to do a serval, get out of, you know, go through the whole process, discharge, not have to deal with any of that. And, you know, you still have limitations at that point, but at least you're not having to fight against that tide. So, you know, if you get into a good facility where there's structure and there's opportunity, then that can make a good permanent difference. Whereas the other one, particularly for sex offenders, because what happens in those facilities that are filled with all the things that you don't want to be around is that those people who are under the influence of that atmosphere are going to single out the sex offenders and can create tremendous problems that can get them sent back to prison on things they didn't even do. So the location can make a big difference. I mean, you might say, oh, you know, my son's got a place out there in, you know, on the other side of the mountains, and there ain't nothing to do out there. Chase cows, you know, so there's no work. Well, is that really wisdom to be out there unless they're, you know, it's a great program where they're, you know, teaching them skills, trades, or something that can be used down the road. But you need to really kind of look at what do I have to work with, and don't wait until 6 months or 3 weeks before. Start looking ahead of time. What, you know, what's out there? Who's doing what? Talk to the people that would know, you know, and that can even, and believe it or not, that could actually be your parole officers. You know, sit and visit with them. Who you hang with can help you out or can hang you out to dry. And so that's really important too. You know, what's the city like that this center's at? What neighborhood's it in? What's going on there? We have specific boundaries in our ministry about what we do. For instance, we're in the middle of, people say, where are you? I say, oh, we're right in the middle of Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, we've got the prostitutes walking by and, you know, the folks that are high and, you know, it's just, we've had, I can't tell you how many times they've rented to a drug dealer right next to us. They got more traffic than McDonald's. Seriously. And so, but what happens is we don't, on the front of the house, we keep our shades closed. That's mandatory. In the bedrooms and the offices, we just, you know, we have one door, even though it's a duplex, we have only one door that's an entry, and we keep the lights on at night on the out front. I mean, we do everything we can to, you know, make sure that we keep things as visible as possible or to block ourselves from anything that would be considered evil. So you have to really look at, you know, where are they hanging out, and then who are they hanging out with. If they're hanging out with New Name Ministries, then I can tell you right now they're going to be in an environment where they're going to watch over each other, you know. But there are other places where you go and it's like, oh my gosh, really? They kind of come and go as they please, and it's kind of mishmash, and you know they're required to go to one Bible study a week, and you better go to your AA, and you know you just better have that rent on Friday. And to me, that's not anything more than a transitional facility, and you better get them through there as fast as possible, because that's just trouble waiting to happen. Consider all your possibilities and their impact. Don't let the lack of funds keep you from applying to some place that you would like to see your loved one go to, if that's what you're thinking about. Now, it's better to apply early than late. Now, we have a requirement that we say not until you get to the point where you are up for parole. can you make application to us? So with that understanding, we have guys that have been accepted. They've gone for parole. They've been accepted by the ministry. They submit that as part of their parole plan, and they'll get a set-off. So they've got to wait another year or 2, sometimes 3. But they're still on our accepted list. And so we give them a fresh letter. Every 6 months, we send them a refreshed letter that they can turn in, because I never know when they're going to go, oh, it's your lucky day, you won the lottery, and you've got a letter, and you can go, we're going to get rid of you. I've had it happen. So applying for lack of, even if you have a lack of funds, you may find that your loved one sends an application in, and it absolutely touches the heart of the people who are serving. And they, I've had that happen before. I've had, I've gotten letters that just crushed me. My wife would, and I said, honey, will you please read this? And she'll get crushed. It's like, okay, we just got to take him. He didn't have funds, and he graduated. He was a retread. He went out, got stuck on stupid. We brought him back in the second time. He graduated, and he's still a free man. He's married now, and, he's working, and, it's just, and he paid his bills. He honored the ministry, He didn't have funds, though. He didn't have anybody. So you never know. You don't ask, you don't know. Family affairs. Caution! Emotional landmines and ambushes at hand. Have to be careful. And, I'm not trying to cast assertions of lack of character or, being manipulative by nature, but I just want to tell you that they've been incarcerated and they've learned how to manipulate. That's what that whole environment's about. They've learned how to be performers. They know what mom wants. They know what makes mom give in. They know what they want, but they're not going to get it the right way. They're going to go after it the fast way. And so you got to be real careful with that. And that might be part of what you have to look at in regard to being honest with yourself about, is it really healthy for my son to come home? Maybe it would be better for him to go to a 6-month program or a 1-year program. Maybe it's a better investment to financially do it that way and rebuild the relationship at a distance, and he proves to himself and others that he's capable of moving forward and being a man. So I'm throwing that up because I just had a gentleman leave the ministry, and it really soured my heart that he was able to manipulate his mother into letting him come back home. And I had sat with this woman, counseled her. She had agreed. She'd established a boundary, but he was still able to go in and do that even after agreeing that, yes, my son is manipulative. Yes, he knows how to I won't let him do that, and then turned. And the sad part is this kid had a job, could have gone out and got his own apartment, but wanted to sponge off his mom. And so we just need to be careful and not allow ourselves to be victimized again. So, just saying. So standing on your own doesn't mean being alone. In other words, if he's like, I want, stop treating me like a child. The one I was just telling you about, the one that we were crushed on, I'll never forget him standing in the doorway and going, I'm 51 years old, I ain't got nothing, I feel like a little kid, you treat me like a little kid. I said, because you're acting like a little kid, shut up and go to your room. I mean, it's like, if they're going to act like children, then you have to treat them like children. And you have to make sure that they don't choose to do things alone anymore. Most of the time, the reason they got in trouble was because they were on their own. And, you have to be looking for the signs, because they can be going to an AA meeting with 100 people in it and still feel 100% alone. And they could even be yucking it up, but still not being real. And you have to be real with yourself. You have to be asking yourself, is he really talking about anything, or is he just talking to me? So you just need to be, be aware. This is reentry. If you're going to do it as a family, then you're going to have to be real. Your kids need to be stabilized first. This is for the ones, particularly for women, the thing I see with those who work with women, most of the women that we've seen in reentry, a lot of them have women, have children, and they just feel as though they need to get back to those kids. My kids need me. Absolutely. No question asked. But the most important thing that your kids need is a stabilized parent. A parent who is standing on both feet, has their head on their shoulders, and can show their children the right way to do business. And so it's really important that, whether, and some of these guys who are fathers, they come out and they feel so horrific about the fact that they've abandoned their children through the consequences of their choices. And I have to encourage them that, yes, in this next year is the most important investment you can make in their future. Take the time. Don't be in a hurry. If you're rejected, you can start or join a new family. When our guys come to our ministry, we say two things. Welcome home, which means you have a new family, and welcome to the ministry, which gives them purpose. And they can do the same thing, They can go join a men's discipleship group, or maybe they get involved in some other volunteer opportunity that parole or probation will agree with that actually has meaning and purpose for them, outside of what's required of them. Help them. Help them think about somebody besides themselves. Relationship prior to restoration is dangerous. The last thing that they need to do is get involved emotionally with somebody in that first year. That's the last thing they need. They really need to find out who they are without a jumpsuit and bars clanging and without feeling threatened at every move they make. They don't need a mummy. They need to keep their priorities straight, and they need to give others time to see and accept the new them. They need to accept themselves really first. And then they need to learn that they can trust themselves before they should even expect somebody else to trust them. And then, friends or family, you get to pick. That's how it should be. Encourage them to pick the right friends. I couldn't receive that when I was a kid. I had troubled friends, and it's because I was a troubled kid. Water seeks its own level. It's one of my favorite sayings. And so the trick is, going back to vision and talking about planning and purpose, is to say, if you could pick the friends you want, who would you pick? What would be their qualities? What would be the benefit of that relationship? That's vision casting. That's inviting them to step into relationships of that nature. Look to that point. Surround yourself with those people. Remember I said surround yourself with positives? It's an interesting parody that came to me recently about if you take a look around, pick your two best friends, people you hang out with the most. Look at how much they make for income. You're probably going to be right in the middle of them. Interesting concept. But I think it applies as well with our personal relationships and our achievements. Okay. Transportation. This is a big issue. Unless you've got lots of bucks and you can afford to pay for a car and insurance and gasoline on top of what you're already doing. So you want to locate, if they're going to be going into a transitional facility, please remember, the ones that are way out in the boonies, limit them. The ones that are in the city are better because they do have the alternative to public transportation. It may limit them to the amount of jobs and opportunities they have, but getting a job is a start. And then if you create a working budget for starting and future transportation needs, you want them to think economy. I don't know what it is with all my guys. They all want a truck.
Texas.
Yeah, well, you're Texas. You're right. It's like, boy, you got to get some boots first. But, think economy. I mean, my wife and I both drive Priuses, and I get to laugh at people when I go fill up at the gas station. But, it's important that, as they're working their budget out, they think, how much is it going to cost me to get where I need to go? And then you work that into your job searching as well, because the bus line only goes so far. And, you need to be looking at, thank you, Jeff. What do I got, 5 minutes? No. Well, thank you. Anyways. So, Find someone knowledgeable to help with the process of selecting and purchasing a vehicle. It may be a third-party person. Always have a reputable mechanic look it over before negotiating and buying a vehicle. I can't tell you how many times my guys, because they're scared, they'll jump at the first thing because they have poor impulse judgment, and they just want to get it over with because they're stressing, rather than listening to reason. And, you know, one of my guys recently, I said, don't do anything until you have it checked out, and I'll be danged. He took that as, well, I checked it out. Not what I said, what he wanted to hear. You know, and if you're controlling the checkbook, then make sure you control the situation. And I would recommend keeping the car in your name until he's proven himself as having the ability to honor the responsibility. Because if you don't have any control, you don't have any control. Make it legal. Don't let them buy a car that's not legal. You don't want to give that PO a reason to bust them. Or the cop that stops him and says, oh, you're a sex offender? And they'll nail him for everything on that car. He has to report to his PO, and the PO says, revocation. Sorry, conditions of your parole. So, sounds like silly stuff, but real quick, unemployment. I'm going to run through this, and I apologize. We've gone over our time. Feel free, if you're done before I am, feel free to leave. But when it comes to employment, you may notice in these little pictures, this guy's wearing a tie, and he's telling his story, and she's happy to hear his story because he's telling the truth, and he's only answering the questions they're asking. Don't have to go back to Egypt. You don't have to fabricate. You just have to go have a good interview and have fun with it. Attitude's the issue. If you take 1/10 the energy you put into complaining and apply it to solving the problem, you'd be surprised how well things can work out. Complaining does not work as a strategy. We all have finite time and energy, and any time we spend whining is unlikely to help us achieve our goals, and it won't make us happier. And a positive attitude from you tends to produce a positive attitude toward you. It's a choice. It's just that simple. For job search, here's some quick perspectives. You're not alone, others are competing. So you have to remember you're in this race. You get competition. Turn failures into valuable life lessons. That's really important when they go in for the interview, that they say to the person they're speaking to, one of the advantages of hiring me is I've learned some invaluable lessons. I know what not to do. I know the consequences of choices, and I value what would be offered to me more than anybody else you have here. So you're turning...
Sorry.
What's that?
Can you repeat those again, please? I wasn't writing quick enough.
We weren't writing quick enough. You're going to take and turn those life lessons into an asset. I'm going to say it differently. You're going to turn the life lesson into an asset because you're going to say, I know the value of this job because I know the consequences of poor choices. I know what not to do. And I won't let you down because I'm not going to let me down. Why would I hire you? Because I got a better view of what can really happen than the guy who has never had anything happen to him at all. So you turn those failures into valuable life lessons, and you promote loyalty as a reward for that opportunity. One of the two things I hear from parole officers and treatment providers all over the nation is that sex offenders are the most compliant people, and they are the most stable employees. If they get a job, they keep it. So that's, you turn that into part of your presentation when you're visiting with these people to say, you can even check with my PO. She'll tell you, I'm compliant and that I meet expectation or exceed. And you turn it into a positive. And then you turn your setbacks into comebacks to say, listen, I know where I'll go back to if I choose to do what I've done in the past. And that ain't going to happen. And I am more determined than before to be the best carpenter, the best accountant, the best whatever it is. Let employers know you have less time to put in for retirement. You don't have any time to fool around. You got guys that have been down 10, 15, I got 127 years. He hasn't got time to fool around. Then you have to get that mindset of every no is one step closer to their yes. They have to understand that, okay, so they go in, they get an interview, and it's a no. Thank you for the practice. Now I know, I forgot to tell them this, or dang, I shouldn't have said that, or, Always thank the employers for their time. Thank them for being considered. And if they don't have a job for you, or they choose not to hire you, ask them to refer you to somebody. Employers know who? Employers. That's their circle. And so they know who's hiring. You go to a machine shop and he says, no, I'm not hiring. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm glad you're doing well. Glad you're willing to speak to me. And do you happen to know of any other machine shops that would be a good fit for me? Well, yeah, I know Charlie Daniels down the road here. He's always hiring people. Hey, thanks so much. Can I tell him you... See? Free information. You get to pass go and collect $200. So prep, you utilize reentry services. Listen, every parole office, every major city is going to have reentry facilities. They're going to have caseworkers, they're going to have computer terminals, they're going to have workforce solutions, they're going to have something out there that is a program for reentry to some degree or another. And it's really important that you find out who those people are and how you get connected to those services. And that changes a lot, but I would encourage you to check with parole. Parole can become a really good resource, or probation, however it is in your situation. Create multiple target resumes. In other words, okay, again, so you may have been a CPA, but what else can you do? You like woodworking? You just spent the last 10 years doing specialty crafts, and maybe it's something that's actually marketable. Make that your second resume. Then if you have a third one, well, I can do yard work. I love working outside. So now you can go to, see what I'm saying? You have multiple resumes. So when you go to that meeting, they go, yeah, I'm ABC landscaping. If you guys know anybody who does landscaping, you're like, I got that landscaping resume right here. I've grown trees since I was this high. Okay, include all your employment skills, just like Glenn was saying earlier. Even the prison stuff, it's important. Skills are skills. And then do face-to-face practice interviews and calls. So it might be that you sit down with your child and you start asking those questions, just doing the role play. And then target the areas with multiple opportunities for making applications and getting interviews. We take our guys to industrial parks where there are 225 businesses. Even if they're on the GPS, we get their parole officer to give them permission to do their search in that arena for that day. And we give them a cell phone and say, call us when you're done. Or we say, we'll pick you up at 4:30. And you'd be amazed. In fact, this one guy, Eeyore, well, no one's going to hire me. Hi, you're not hiring, are you? Well, actually, we are. Oh, well, what are you hiring? Well, we're looking for someone who can do this. Well, I could do that. Good. When can you start? First door he walked in. You got to put yourself in the position, and you got to strategize. And you can do that. You can be the scout before they even get out. So, you got to take a look at considering the transportation issue in that situation. Now, those industrial areas are all near bus stops for us. But the question is do the buses run so that they can be to work on time? Because usually the employer might say, well, you need to be here at 6 o'clock because we work 6 to 2:30. That bus doesn't leave till 5:30 and won't arrive until 6:50. Unless you can make that arrangement with them. Or you might find out if he just is honest, get back to being honest, I'm limited by local transportation, do you have someone who works in this area that I could ride share, and I'll pay them $25 a week for fuel? Well, actually, yeah, Jerry works right down the street, you know. Resource, and that's part of what happens is I see these guys, they'll go, Pastor John, you know, I got a call back on that lead that I put in last week. Really? Where is it? I don't know, but I got to be there tomorrow at 3. I mean, seriously, that's how scattered they are, because they're not keeping contacts and checking against transportation limitations. So, you know, it sounds silly, but let's see. Utilize those old new networks. Registries too. Here's another thing. If your registry has a listing of employers on it, use it. Go out there to the zip codes that you're working, you know, they're looking that's serviceable for them, where the transportation goes, and go get those lists. Find out who they are. Maintain tracking for follow-up and sharing. Pursue face-to-face contact. Dress for success. This is one thing that people, you know, I have guys who go out in shorts and a T-shirt. Really? No. And then making sure they follow up on those contacts. And you pursue those face-to-face contacts first. Because if you don't, you may be walking by the job that's ready today, as opposed to putting in applications online. See, you know, that's that doing something as opposed to doing something. Dress for success, firm handshake, make eye contact, show up early and ready to go to work. Target small businesses for easier access. I can't tell you how important that is. You want to get in. It's easier if you can get face-to-face with the owner of the business, who's a decision maker and can, out of confidentiality, make that happen. And then remember that your past hasn't defined you, it's refined you. That's really important, that whole attitude. Your job until you find a job is to find a job. Your job is not who you are, it's what you do. And you find a job you love, you'll never work again, and your job is the best resource for a new job. And it's never too late to be what you might have been.